Picture yourself visiting your uncle who has recently awakened from a 17-year coma only to discover that he's speaking nonsensically. Allow me to introduce you to Takafumi and his uncle Yosuke. Yosuke claims to have spent the last 17 years in an alternate realm called Grand Mammal. Takafumi gazes in disbelief, assuming his uncle must be suffering from mental impairment. Sensing Takafumi's skepticism, his uncle attempts to validate his claims by showcasing his magical abilities. Uttering incantations in an unfamiliar language, he tries to conjure magic, but disappointingly, nothing transpires, much to Takafumi's dismay. Takafumi proceeds to express his financial hardships and inability to provide support, when suddenly, Yosuke inadvertently triggers a gust of wind while uttering Japanese words. In that moment, Takafumi realizes his uncle was telling the truth. Yosuke, an avid enthusiast, inquires about the ongoing console wars and Sega's current state. Upon discovering that Sega no longer manufactures gaming consoles, he becomes disheartened. Swiftly jotting something down in his notebook, he proceeds to cast a spell that miraculously cures a condition called Quora. Intrigued, Takafumi inquires about Akira's Quora, and his uncle reveals it as a spell utilized to erase distressing memories. However, Yosuke makes a written record of it in his notebook before obliterating it. Consumed by curiosity, Takafumi pleads to read the notebook, which he immediately regrets upon doing so. It brings him to tears, leading him to implore his uncle to employ Akira's Quora spell on him. After a week, Yosuke is released from the hospital and begins living with Takafumi. Meanwhile, Takafumi seizes the opportunity to monetize his uncle's powers and starts uploading videos of their magical encounters on YouTube, which proves to be a source of ad revenue. Later, Yosuke curiously questions Takafumi about his spacious apartment, wondering why he lives alone in such a big place. Takafumi explains that it was originally intended for room sharing, but the arrangement didn't work out. Yosuke, unfamiliar with the term room share, expresses his happiness that Takafumi has found friends to live with. Inquisitive about Yosuke's companions in the alternate world, Takafumi asks him about his experiences. Yosuke reveals that he mostly traveled alone for the past 17 years as he was perceived as a monster and constantly hunted down by the beautiful inhabitants of that world. Yosuke mentions one particular individual who persistently followed and harassed him. Despite saving her life, she responded rudely. As Yosuke continues to recount his encounters with this person, Takafumi realizes that she actually had feelings for his uncle but struggled to express them due to a concept called its son to Rei, which didn't exist 17 years ago. Yosuke shifts his attention to the comments on their YouTube videos, where one viewer criticizes the authenticity of their magical demonstrations. Yosuke finds himself struggling with using the internet and facing haters for the first time, navigating the challenges that come with online platforms. On a particular day, Yosuke becomes intrigued by a vintage rotary cell phone up for auction. Takafumi cautions him that it won't function properly as it operates on a 2G signal. However, Yosuke insists on getting it anyway, while also expressing his admiration for the innovation of smartphones but lamenting their lack of unique features. Yosuke then recounts an incident from the other world where he crafted a spell to create an everlasting pot of water using spell cards, benefiting a drought-stricken village. Takafumi is impressed and imagines the villagers praising his uncle for this remarkable invention. However, the reality was quite different. Instead of appreciation, the villagers attempted to hang Yosuke, considering it sacrilegious and ultimately destroy the pot. Amidst the chaos, an elf arrives to intervene and Yosuke seizes the opportunity to escape. Suddenly, Yosuke receives a notification that the auction for the cell phone is about to end. In a panic, he hastily places the order without checking the shipping cost, which turns out to be 2,000 yen due to it being sold by someone from an isolated island. Takafumi regrets not being closer to the location, as they could have saved on shipping costs by picking it up personally. To Takafumi's surprise, Yosuke's cat jumps out of the window but returns after 30 minutes, bringing back the cell phone. Yosuke proudly shows it off to Takafumi, who then suggests the idea of picking up other items to save on shipping costs, to which Yosuke agrees. Takafumi receives a package and asks his uncle for something to open it with. Surprisingly, his uncle hands him a short sword. Curious, Takafumi asks where it came from. Yosuke reveals his storage magic by pulling out his notebook, leaving Takafumi wondering if his uncle brought more items from the other world. Yosuke then presents some rings, claiming they are rare enough to be traded for a castle. Takafumi gets excited, but his uncle disappoints him by informing him that he tried selling the rings at a pawn shop, only to be offered a mere 50 yen, due to their mistaken belief that the rings were mere toys. Takafumi asks if his uncle intends to give the rings to someone, but Yosuke explains that they are actually trophies from clearing a dungeon. Noticing Takafumi's downcast mood, Yosuke suggests discussing love and shares a story about his first love, Sonic and Tails. Yosuke reminisces about visiting a toy store and watching the title screen of the game. Curiosity piqued, Takafumi asks if his uncle encountered any girls in the other world. Yosuke reveals a memory of rescuing a girl and her siblings from an ark. Initially grateful, the girl eventually despairs upon seeing Yosuke's face and decides to sacrifice herself to save her siblings. Yosuke mistakenly interprets her actions as happiness and gratitude. Suddenly, he blacks out and believes that goblins attacked him from behind and threw him into a river. However, thanks to the intervention of the elf, Yosuke's uncle was saved from the attackers. Grateful for her assistance, Yosuke's uncle feels indebted to the elf and offers her an extremely rare ring as a token of gratitude. The elf becomes flustered and blushes as he places the ring on her finger, ultimately accepting it. Takafumi is shocked by the turn of events and realizes that the elf mistook the gesture as a proposal. In the end, Yosuke's uncle sells the ring to repay his perceived debt and unintentionally abandons the elf in a random town. Consequently, the elf starts following him everywhere for the next 17 years. Yosuke advises Takafumi to put his sword away, which ends up inspiring Takafumi's next viral YouTube video, garnering over 2 million views within a week. A week later, on a rainy day, Yosuke receives a package containing the final issue of a Sega magazine he never had the chance to read. Takafumi shows no interest, but as his uncle reads through the magazine, he discovers that the most popular game featured in it is a dating sim, while his favorite game, Guardian Heroes, is ranked a disappointing 197th. Feeling disheartened, Yosuke stands outside in the pouring rain and gets struck by lightning, passionately declaring that Guardian Heroes should have been the winner. Once the rain subsides, Takafumi tries to console his uncle by pointing out that at least an RPG placed second. However, he learns that his uncle never played RPGs due to his difficulty in remembering objectives. Mentioning RPGs triggers Yosuke's memory of a similar encounter he had. In the memory, he learns about a village threatened by a dragon, with the only way to defeat it being a specialized sword held by a girl named Mabel. To obtain the sword, Yosuke must heal Mabel's broken heart. When Yosuke meets Mabel, she shares a story about a specific flower that her mother once showed her. Yosuke abruptly leaves and confronts the dragon, slaying it without needing the sword. Takafumi remarks that Yosuke should have retrieved the flowers from Mabel, but his uncle explains that it was too challenging for him to remember the village's details. The elder is shocked to learn that Yosuke defeated the dragon without the sword, leaving Mabel in a state of misery. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, announcing the arrival of a package containing a Sega Saturn and 20 games. Takafumi presents it to his uncle as a gift, leaving Yosuke pleasantly surprised. Excitedly, the two of them spend time playing games together on New Year's Eve. Intrigued by the concept of New Year's celebrations in the other world, Takafumi asks his uncle to share his memory of a New Year's Eve party. However, the memory disappoints him as it reveals that his uncle ate alone and retired to his room while everyone else was joyously celebrating. Disheartened by the memory, they decide to divert their attention to playing games on the Sega Saturn. During their gaming session, Yosuke confesses to Takafumi that Mabel visited him on that same night. Intrigued, Takafumi insists on witnessing the events of her visit. Yosuke shares his memory, revealing that Mabel sought guidance on overcoming her cowardice and becoming strong like him. Yosuke initially delivers a motivational speech, but it takes a drastic turn when he realizes that Mabel prefers her reclusive nature. He reassures her that it's okay to stay that way and to embrace her fears. Although Mabel offers him the ice sword, he declines, citing its coldness. The memory ends, and they continue their New Year's Eve by enjoying noodles and discussing games. The following day, they encounter a woman named Fujimiya. She feels uneasy when she sees Yosuke talking to himself on a bench. As she walks away, she coincidentally runs into Takafumi, and they briefly catch up. Takafumi extends an invitation for Fujimiya to visit his place, and she agrees but mentions that she needs to drop off her groceries first. About 30 minutes later, Fujimiya arrives and receives a text from Takafumi, informing her that he's out getting snacks but will be home soon. She enters the place, and shortly after, Yosuke lands on the balcony. Upon noticing Fujimiya, Yosuke charges at her, pinning her down and attempts to erase her memory of what she saw. However, Takafumi returns just in time and intervenes, explaining that Fujimiya is his friend. Upon hearing this, Yosuke offers his apologies and thanks Fujimiya for being Takafumi's friend. Afterward, Takafumi tries to explain to Fujimiya about his uncle's ability to use magic and his career as a YouTuber. However, Fujimiya dismisses Yosuke as crazy and accuses him of taking advantage of Takafumi's kindness. She suggests that Yosuke should leave Takafumi's life and live his own. Yosuke, sensing Fujimiya's feelings for Takafumi despite her denial, refuses to believe that they're just friends. He swiftly dashes behind Fujimiya and reads her mind, discovering that she changed her outfit and even showered before coming over, causing her to feel embarrassed. At that moment, the doorbell rings and Yosuke goes to answer it. Fujimiya suggests that Takafumi should cut ties with his uncle, even offering to help him with rent. However, Takafumi misinterprets her suggestion, thinking she wants to become his roommate one day. As Takafumi returns home, he finds a confused-looking Fujimiya accompanied by the elf from the other world who arrived 75 minutes earlier. Takafumi informs his uncle about Fujimiya's visit and then proceeds to read his uncle's ignored email, realizing that it was in English, which he couldn't understand. Takafumi informs his uncle that the message is from YouTube and warns him that he might soon be jobless. YouTube has changed its requirements to earn money, requiring 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time. While his uncle's channel has enough watch time, it only has 812 subscribers. Takafumi realizes that his uncle's low subscriber count is due to his uncle's rude replies in the comments, insisting that his magic is real. This stressful predicament reminds Yosuke of a time in the other world when the defensive barrier of a sealed city broke and 1,000 monsters invaded. Curious about what happened, Takafumi eagerly asks Yosuke to show him the memory. In the memory, Yosuke sees an enormous barrier surrounding the entire city, and the residents become alarmed, mistaking him for an orc. However, the elf is present and assures them that Yosuke only resembles an orc, and that the barrier would have killed him if he truly was one. The elf explains that the barrier is meant to protect the city from mythical beasts in the surrounding area. Yosuke summons his 2 energy swords, which shoot a beam of energy, destroying the barrier. The residents panic and Takafumi is left speechless, questioning why his uncle would do such a thing. Yosuke reveals that his uncle simply wanted to test if he could break the barrier. With the barrier destroyed, an army of giant cyclops led by a cloud dragon appears outside the city, preparing to invade. Assessing their dire situation, the elf takes out her legendary sword and prepares to fight. She dashes through the sky towards the cyclops, but the barrier reforms, causing her to crash into it. It turns out that Yosuke had asked the spirits to repair the broken barrier, and they did so. The monsters eventually leave, but the residents remain suspicious of Yosuke. However, the elf diffuses the situation and, in return for not revealing Yosuke's involvement in breaking the barrier, keeps his secret. She asks Yosuke to take her on a date, much to Takafumi's joy. However, Yosuke ends up skipping town, leaving Takafumi horrified. His uncle fled to avoid being blackmailed by her. Remembering how Yosuke asked the spirits for help, he decides to ask people to subscribe to his YouTube channel. Takafumi believes it's a bad idea, fearing that internet trolls will exploit his weakness. However, the opposite happens and more people subscribe to the channel, enough for Yosuke to save his channel. Fujiya arrives and wonders what's going on between the two of them. Afterwards, she lectures Yosuke about being a burden on Takafumi and how being a YouTuber isn't financially sufficient. Yosuke brushes it off, and Fujiya mentions that Takafumi can't have a girlfriend living with him due to his living arrangements. Upon hearing this, Yosuke suggests that Fujiya live with them, but Takafumi refuses the suggestion. Takafumi receives a message about a sale and heads out to the shops. Once Takafumi is gone, Yosuke tries to have a heart-to-heart conversation with Fujiya about her relationship with Takafumi, but she refuses. Yosuke talks about the romances he has experienced in video games, but Fujiya rejects the comparison. Yosuke leaves the room and Fujiya feels guilty and goes to apologize to him, only to find the elf in Yosuke's clothes. The elf introduces herself as Takafumi's aunt and attempts to continue her heart-to-heart conversation with Fujiya until Takafumi returns home. Takafumi is surprised by the elf claiming to be his aunt and questions why Yosuke didn't change his appearance in the other world. Yosuke tells Takafumi that the transformation magic he mentioned is forbidden, as it could lead to losing one's own identity. However, Takafumi comes up with an idea and suggests shooting a YouTube video about his uncle's transformation magic. Initially hesitant, his uncle is convinced after Takafumi promises to play Guardian Heroes with him. Meanwhile, Fujiya is left confused by the video uploaded to the internet. They decide to watch one of Takafumi's past memories, and Fujiya is shocked to witness the magic. However, Takafumi convinces her that it's just a hologram projector. The memory reveals how Fujiya used to bully Takafumi, leaving her horrified to remember her past behavior instead of the sweet memories she had. She tries to stop them from watching, but in the end they reconcile and become friends. As the video finishes uploading, they watch it together. Takafumi pretends that his uncle is a VTuber. Yosuke is horrified to see that the video contains no footage of the game they promised. However, to their surprise, it becomes an instant success, garnering over 200,000 views. The comments are filled with compliments about how cute Takafumi's uncle looks. Takafumi celebrates their success while Yosuke becomes depressed and reverts back to his true form, leaving Fujiya shocked by the sight. Despite Yosuke's pride being destroyed, they all enjoy a nice sushi dinner with the money he earned from the video. They decide to watch another one of Takafumi's memories where he gets bullied by 2 boys. However, Fujiya ends up turning the tables and bullies the boys, leading to Takafumi admiring her. This in turn causes Fujiya to feel depressed. She admits that she used to be a brat but shares how she became more feminine during middle school. During their conversation, Fujiya notices that her coffee tastes particularly nice. Takafumi reveals that he bought a coffee grinder and beans with the money his uncle gave him for his birthday. Thinking about giving Takafumi a gift in return, Fujiya sends him a photo of herself in a swimsuit from her middle school days, hoping to entice him. However, Takafumi immediately tries to delete it, not wanting to have a picture of an underage girl on his phone. This devastates Fujiya. Suddenly, Takafumi receives an alert for a sale on coffee beans and goes out to buy them. Fujiya has an outburst of rejection, causing Yosuke to spill his coffee. Reflexively, Yosuke casts ice magic, freezing the coffee and accidentally freezing Fujiya as well. Yosuke quickly thaws her out and Fujiya is left drenched. Yosuke tells her to take a shower and steps out, leaving some of Takafumi's clothes for her to wear once she's dry. After Fujiya finishes her shower, she puts on Takafumi's top, but then Takafumi walks in on her. They have a stare-off and Fujimiya shrieks in embarrassment, causing Takafumi to quickly leave while apologizing. However, Fujimiya secretly hopes that Takafumi is enticed after seeing her like that, but he is oblivious and apologizes again, telling her he will take responsibility, which confuses her. Takafumi calls Yosuke home and tells him to erase his memory of the incident. Fujimiya stops him, saying that she didn't mind. To her dismay, Takafumi thanks her for being such a considerate and thoughtful friend. A week later, on Fujimiya's 20th birthday, Yosuke decides to share his life philosophy with her. He tells her about the importance of never giving up because things can change in an instant. Impressed by his wise words, Fujimiya listens attentively. Yosuke then decides to show them a memory from his own 20th birthday. In the memory, Yosuke is approached by the elf who had joined him earlier. The elf confronts him about the barrier he broke and offers her silence as a bribe in exchange for some food. However, the conversation takes a turn as they discuss Yosuke's strength and heroic feats. He recalls saving the elf from a deadly venom dragon and mentions how he even killed the blaze dragon without the ice sword. The elf is shocked to learn about Yosuke's accomplishments, especially killing the blaze dragon without the usual weapon. Yosuke provides proof by showing her the remnants of the blaze dragon's fire. He explains that his achievements are possible because he never gives up, reiterating his life philosophy. Yosuke then reveals to the elf that he learned this philosophy from a game strategy guide. Takafumi and Fujimiya are left speechless by this revelation, trying to process the extraordinary nature of Yosuke's abilities. Afterward, Yosuke excuses himself to play some games, leaving Takafumi and Fujimiya in awe of what they have just witnessed. As the memory continues, Yosuke invites the elf to accompany him back to his inn. Initially reluctant, the elf is surprised when Yosuke grabs her arm and convinces her to come along. This action shocks both Takafumi and Fujimiya, who observe the scene. Yosuke and the elf make their way back to the inn, where Yosuke expresses his gratitude to the elf for supporting him through challenging times. The elf, taken aback by the depth of Yosuke's appreciation, realizes how much she means to him. They eventually reach the inn, and the elf confesses that she would support Yosuke forever. However, Yosuke assures her that it's not necessary and simply thanks her for her support. He then locks her out of his room and goes to sleep. The next morning, the determined elf confronts Yosuke once again, demanding to know his plans for the day. Takafumi is filled with awe at the elf's resilience, but Fujimiya notices the traces of tears in her eyes, indicating that she had cried throughout the night. Overwhelmed by this revelation, Fujimiya turns to alcohol and insists that Yosuke joins her in drinking. Yosuke quickly becomes intoxicated, stumbling around. Fujimiya, trying to come up with a solution for Yosuke's financial struggles, suggests that he pursue a career as a professional baseball player, utilizing his magical abilities to pitch exceptionally fast balls. However, Yosuke recalls his past experiences of being looked down upon by the baseball team in his class during his younger years, though he still held respect for their unwavering dedication to daily practice. He firmly believes that resorting to magical means to cheat in baseball would contradict his personal morals. Yosuke further reflects on the inherently perilous nature of baseball terms like dead ball and stealing bases, which trigger memories of a time when he was nearly assassinated. He shares a specific recollection where he tirelessly traverses a forest after completing a challenging dungeon. Suddenly, a person closely trails him, and it is revealed to be Mabel from the Ice Clan. Mabel freezes Yosuke's legs in place and forcefully tackles him to the ground. Puzzled, Yosuke questions Mabel's presence, to which she sarcastically retorts that she was relieved of her duties because he had managed to defeat the dragon without utilizing the ice sword. Yosuke fails to grasp the sarcasm in her statement. Yosuke expresses his happiness for Mabel despite being at her mercy. When Mabel questions why he didn't defend himself, Yosuke responds by stating that he knows she has no intention of killing him. He then asks if she has been eating properly, which causes Mabel to whimper, cry, and eventually pass out on Yosuke's lap. Yosuke carries Mabel to his room in an inn and gently places her on his bed. After Mabel regains consciousness, Yosuke offers her a loaf of bread and inquires why she didn't become a government official in her village. Mabel reveals that her tree home was destroyed for firewood as she was deemed unnecessary. She was given the choice to become the village pet or leave. In response, she froze the feet of all the villagers and splashed icy water on their necks before fleeing. Shocked by Mabel's determination, Yosuke asks if she truly dislikes working. Mabel mentions a few potential job interests, but believes they require too much physical labor. Yosuke relates her predicament, but shares that he earns a living as an adventurer. He suggests that Mabel could also make a living as an adventurer by utilizing the ice sword, despite her initial reluctance. Yosuke convinces Mabel by emphasizing that she should live life on her own terms. Yosuke reassures her that there is nothing wrong with being an introvert. As they continue their conversation, the ice sword begins to crack, and Yosuke continues to compliment Mabel, causing her to blush and the sword to crack further. Yosuke then points out the ring he had given Mabel while she was asleep, expressing that it can provide for the rest of her life. Misinterpreting his intentions, Mabel's sword completely melts. She tries to decline his offer, but Yosuke insists, leaving her flustered. Yosuke suggests that it's getting late and proposes that Mabel stay the night. Mabel requests to take a bath, but Yosuke sniffs her and reassures her that she doesn't smell bad. He explains that once she sells the ring, she will be able to afford the bath fee and adds that she will never have to worry about money again. However, Mabel misinterprets his words, immediately freezing her sword in response and attempting to attack Yosuke. The elf arrives to see what the commotion is and finds Mabel restrained with Yosuke holding her down. Seeing the situation, the elf releases Mabel from her bindings and freezes Yosuke in place. The elf then bonds with Mabel. The elf expresses her understanding of how traumatic it must have been for Mabel to wake up next to an orc, but Mabel doesn't seem to mind. Mabel goes on to reveal that the people of the Ice Clan share blood with those from another world. She explains the founding history of the Ice Clan, where a samurai from an alternate world was sent there 400 years ago. The samurai had asked the god who reincarnated him to provide him with a sword capable of slaying a god. However, the elf interrupts, stating that she already knows the story from a book, which devastates Mabel. Telling the story was one of the few things Mabel knew how to do, and she breaks down in tears. The elf apologizes and tries to console her. Yosuke is outraged that he never received a special bonus like a god-slaying sword. Takafumi suggests looking back to the moment when Yosuke was first transported to the other world. Yosuke rewinds through his memories and finds the moment of his resurrection. He encounters some men who mistake him for an orc and beat him. Fujiimiya hears a voice interpreted as God, and Takafumi uses his translation app to understand what God was saying. It is revealed that God offered Yosuke the ability to choose an ability of his own, and at that time Yosuke wished to understand and communicate with the people of that world, hoping that it would prevent them from treating him like a monster. However, his wish led to a different outcome. He was captured and sold to a freak show as a rare talking orc, fetching a mere 3 bronze coins. This revelation shocks both Takafumi and Fujiimiya, realizing how little he was valued. As they watch this memory, both Yosuke and Takafumi get nosebleeds. It is then revealed that Yosuke had wiped his memory of this event and Takafumi had his memory erased after reading about it in his uncle's diary. The memory continues and Yosuke finds himself locked away in a prison with other animals. A week passes as the slave trader forgets about him, leading Takafumi and Fujiimiya to believe he has gone mad talking to himself. However, Yosuke actually converses with a ray of moonlight that shines through a crack in the ceiling, discussing a Sega game called Pulsaman. It turns out that the ray of light is the spirit of light named Kill, who teaches Yosuke and grants him his first spell, the Sword of Light. Using the sword, Yosuke escapes the prison. Fujiimiya realizes that Yosuke's language translation ability is what allowed him to communicate with the spirits, which surprises both Yosuke and Takafumi. Yosuke had believed his magic ability came from his adaptability through playing video games. In the memory, Yosuke frees the other captive monsters and they escape together. One of the rabbits follows him and Takafumi wonders if he kept it as a pet, but it turns out to be feral and attacks him. All the monsters turn feral and attack both Yosuke and the slave trader. Determined not to live as an ordinary commoner, Yosuke fights back using his newly acquired light magic and saves the slave trader, although the trader becomes terrified by Yosuke's bloody and crazed appearance. Yosuke then uses his magic to teleport the trader to a safe location. Throughout the night, Yosuke continues to kill the remaining monsters, and in the morning, he cooks and eats them. Yosuke acknowledges that this was a good start to his journey in the other world, surprising both Fujiimiya and Takafumi. As it starts to get late, Fujiimiya decides to go home for dinner, and Yosuke agrees, mentioning how things took a turn for the worse afterward. Yosuke reveals a memory of saving the elf from a venom dragon, killing it with a single blow. Fujiimiya becomes saddened that she missed dinner for this, but Yosuke explains that he merely attacked the weakened spot that the elf had already targeted. Continuing the memory, Yosuke gives the elf his hoodie, but she initially pulls out a knife, mistaking him for an orc. She quickly puts the knife away, but this leads to a misunderstanding with Yosuke thinking she has stabbed herself. He lifts up the hoodie to inspect her stomach, resulting in her calling him a pervert and berating him. This marks the beginning of their troubled relationship. Takafumi and Fujiimiya are left speechless, and Yosuke mentions how the elf always troubled him afterward, such as when she froze him. Fujiimiya asks what happened after Yosuke was frozen, and he shows his memory of lying in bed, suffering from the aftermath. It is revealed that both the elf and Mabel stayed in bed with him throughout the night. Yosuke and the elf share a moment, but it is interrupted by Mabel, who cries for her mother in her sleep, which turns out to be about not wanting to work. The elf wakes her up with a karate chop. A flustered Mabel tries to explain her sleep talk about not wanting to work, and Yosuke suggests she can sell the ring he gave her. However, Mabel is hesitant and inexperienced with bartering. The elf eagerly offers to help her sell it, but Mabel decides to hold onto the ring. Yosuke suggests that the elf can take care of Mabel, which Mabel interprets as becoming the elf's pet. They all have breakfast together, and Mabel formally introduces herself to the elf and Yosuke. The elf, however, does not share her name and simply refers to herself as Elf. She reveals her mission to collect ancient relics. Yosuke surprises Takafumi and Fujimiya by introducing himself as Wolfgang Blood, a fake name. He explains that he is from another country and is trying to find his way back home. Takafumi questions his uncle's decision to use a fake name, and his uncle reveals that he didn't want to reveal his real identity to strangers. The elf announces her plan to return to Ikosa, the town where she sold her ring. Yosuke asks her why, but it becomes apparent to Takafumi and Fujimiya that she wants to buy the ring back, feeling threatened by Mabel. Mabel inquires about Yosuke's plans, and he mentions his intention to explore a nearby dungeon that a hero is attempting to clear. Mabel offers her assistance but mentions the need for a nap before joining him. Yosuke decides to proceed on his own for now. As the day grows late, Yosuke calls it quits and treats Fujimiya and Takafumi to some ramen.
Look, I won!
That's it!
In another memory, the elf awakens and tries to retrieve her necklace using her feet, only to be unexpectedly interrupted by Yosuke. He requests his hoodie back, but she refuses, asserting that it now belongs to her. Determined to reclaim it, Yosuke employs his magic to restrain her, struggling due to the interference caused by the spell. The elf proposes that he could undo the spell to make it easier, and despite reservations, Yosuke agrees. However, once he releases the spell, the elf launches an attack that knocks him out. Overwhelmed by guilt, the elf quickly tends to his injuries and departs from the room. Reflecting on the unsettling events, Yosuke acknowledges the complicated nature of their relationship, mentioning how the elf frequently took his belongings without returning them, except for her dress, which they managed to convince Fujimiya to try on. Seeing Fujimiya in the dress triggers a sense of longing in Yosuke, making him realize how much he actually misses the elf. To finalize matters, Yosuke reveals that he has officially named his language translation skill Wild Talker, a suggestion provided by Takafumi. Fujimiya realizes that she needs to leave as she has college work to attend to. Takafumi watches his uncle play Golden Axe, and his uncle demonstrates his strategy to make the enemy characters walk to their own demise. He proudly credits his gaming skills for saving the day in the other world. Takafumi's memory shifts to a time when Yosuke worked with other adventurers. Initially attacked by the group, Yosuke manages to overpower them and clarifies that he is not a goblin. The group's healer, Alicia, recognizes Yosuke as the person everyone else mistook for an orc during the Winter Festival. The other adventurers, Riga and Edgar, are introduced. Despite initial hesitation, Alicia asks Yosuke for help in protecting a village from a goblin invasion. Yosuke readily agrees. When a horde of goblins approaches, Yosuke shares his plan with the group. However, his attempt to lure the goblins into a pit fails, and he ends up being beaten up by them. Yosuke tries to use the jump attack he learned from his game, but he continuously misses. In the end, he unintentionally destroys a mountain, crushing all the goblins. Yosuke credits his game for providing him with the moves to defeat the goblins, although Takafumi points out that the game's moves didn't actually help him. Afterward, the group returns to the town to collect their reward. Yosuke finally seems to have made friends. However, during the journey, Alicia mentions seeing him rebuild the barrier in the sealed city. In response, Yosuke erases Alicia's, Edgar's, and Riga's memories. Despite this, Yosuke would encounter them again, and after another battle, clear up the misunderstanding that he is not an orc. They inform him that they are now after a giant hedgehog that has been attacking a nearby village. Yosuke imagines Sonic the Hedgehog and suggests attempting to communicate with the monster to find a peaceful solution. However, when the hedgehog appears, Yosuke is disappointed to see that it looks nothing like Sonic. He tries to reason with it using his ability but discovers that it simply enjoys killing humans for fun. Yosuke ultimately incinerates the hedgehog, reducing it to ash. Suddenly, a phone rings and Takafumi realizes that Fujimiya left her phone behind. He convinces his uncle to help him return the phone, and they fly to her location. Upon arriving, they see Fujimiya with a shady-looking man. To ensure Takafumi's safety, Yosuke lends him his powers. Takafumi approaches Fujimiya and returns her phone, causing the man to become apprehensive. However, Takafumi soon realizes that the man is actually Chiaki, Fujimiya's younger brother, and he is overjoyed to see him after so many years. Yosuke joins them, and Fujimiya introduces him to her brother as a YouTuber. Chiaki, however, has no clue who Yosuke is, so he explains his YouTube activities to him. As they chat, Takafumi reveals to Fujimiya how he was prepared to protect her. Intrigued, Fujimiya asks what Takafumi would have done if Chiaki had turned out to be a shady person. Takafumi then demonstrates the powers he borrowed from his uncle by making them both invisible and leaving doubles of themselves behind. They fly up to a higher location, surprising Fujimiya with Takafumi's proficiency in using magic. They find an empty classroom and reminisce about their school days. Fujimiya mentions a time when Takafumi stepped in to help her when she was being ganged up on. However, Takafumi plays the memory and discovers that Fujimiya was actually the one picking on a group of kids. He had misunderstood the situation and thought she was being ganged up on. Despite the misunderstanding, Fujimiya is still flattered by Takafumi's good intentions. Just as they are in the midst of their conversation, a girl suddenly walks in on them, completely shocked by the scene unfolding before her. Tala, Fujumiya's friend, enters the scene and Takafumi introduces himself to her. They get along well and Fujumiya starts feeling a bit jealous of their connection. They eventually return to Takafumi's home where Yosu continues with his memory. He asks the trio if they have heard about the hero who is currently active. Alicia, borrowing Edgar's sword, reveals herself as the Shining Crusader, the legendary hero. She accidentally damages the sword and immediately bows down to apologize to Edgar. Fujumiya is shocked to realize that this is the renowned hero party. When Yosuke examines Alicia's memory, he discovers that they took credit for stopping the goblin invasion, although they have no recollection of it themselves. Alicia questions Yosuke if he was the one who repaired the barrier in the sealed city, which puts him on alert. However, she quickly retracts her question, claiming that she understands his desire to keep a low profile. She promises to keep his secret. Yosuke and the hero party decide to travel together and reach the Labyrinth of Darkness, a ranked dungeon. Upon entering the dungeon, Yosuke immediately casts a spell that reveals a secret shortcut. At the end of the passage, they discover the dungeon's treasure, the Wand of Salvation. However, the party is underwhelmed with how easily they obtained it. Yosuke realizes his mistake and wipes their memories. He then guides them back inside, making them go through the dungeon properly and earn the wand. Takafumi is relieved that everything turned out well, but Yosuke contemplates erasing their memories again to make them forget that he helped them. However, Alicia expresses her joy, stating that this is a memory she will never forget. Yosuke decides not to wipe their memories and leads the group toward the capital. As thanks for his assistance in conquering the dungeon, Alicia presents Yosuke with 3 healing charms. When the memory ends, Takafumi and Fujumiya appreciate Yosuke's ability to handle the situation calmly and cool-headedly. Yosuke explains that he learned to stay cool and composed thanks to his experience playing video games. Takafumi expresses his curiosity about what happened after his uncle went to the capital, prompting his uncle to continue the memory. They witness his uncle confronting a group of soldiers using his magic to read the mind of the commander. Through this, he discovers who was responsible for making Alicia a hero. His uncle vanishes and heads towards the capital, where a meeting takes place between the commander, Chief Ricardo, and the high priests. It is revealed that the hero party was intended to be sacrificial, creating a crisis to increase military funding. Yosuke, appearing in Ricardo's mind, challenges the commander's actions. However, due to his timid demeanor, he struggles to argue against Ricardo's logic.
I mean, you know it's wrong. It's like...
And ends up being surrounded by soldiers. In this dire situation, Yosuke transforms into the form of his middle school homeroom teacher, whom he considers the best debater he knows. But despite his new appearance, he merely ends up repeatedly slapping Ricardo into submission. Even when Ricardo's aide tries to defend him, she also receives a slap, and both of them eventually concede to Yosuke's dominance. Ricardo explains that the world has become unstable with strange occurrences, such as the slaying of the Blaze Dragon and the breaking of the sealed city's barrier. Realizing that he himself was responsible for these events, Yosuke cannot bring himself to continue slapping them. Suddenly, Mabel appears with a blast of energy and Yosuke reverts to his original form. A grand battle ensues between the two, although in reality it is merely an illusion created by Yosuke's magic, and they are actually watching from the sidelines. Yosuke asks Mabel what she is doing there, and she reveals that she has become a knight of the kingdom and developed an ego after getting the job. She suggests that Yosuke should join her and proposes that he throw the fight so she can get a pay raise and make him her underling. However, Yosuke cannot accept losing to her. The soldiers witness the real confrontation after the illusion became too absurd. The commander suspects Mabel of being in cahoots with Yosuke. Mabel starts fighting Yosuke for real, even injuring some soldiers. Yosuke skillfully dodges her attacks and unleashes his energy sword, shattering the ice she creates. Mabel suddenly regains control of herself, revealing that she was being mind-controlled by the high priest. Yosuke condemns Ricardo for working with someone who uses such tactics. Ricardo worries about how they will protect the kingdom, but Yosuke vows to protect them from any crisis that arises. He transforms into the Blaze Dragon to demonstrate his strength and flies away. Takafumi and Fujumiya are amazed by Yosuke's coolness, but he attributes it all to his gaming skills. After some time, Mabel loses her position as a knight of the kingdom. The memory shifts, and Takafumi finds himself with scales all over his body. He recalls borrowing his uncle's power and using shortened incantations. His uncle explains that using shortened incantations is like being rude and demanding to the spirits, hence his punishment of transforming into a dinosaur. Fujumiya panics at the sight of Takafumi's transformation, but Yosuke assures her not to worry and ends up transforming into a dinosaur himself, standing by Takafumi's side. Meanwhile, a major heatwave is affecting Japan, and both Takafumi and Yosuke feel its intense effects. Yosuke, frustrated by his malfunctioning Seba Saturn, has a meltdown. Fujumiya suggests using magic to cool down the room, and Yosuke immediately casts an icy breeze using his ice magic. They thank Fujumiya for her genius idea. Curious about the spirits, Fujumiya wonders what they actually look like. Takafumi imagines beautiful fairies, but Yosuke explains that spirits don't have physical forms and are more like a collection of wills. He can only hear their voices. Suddenly, Yosuke hears a spirit and declares that they need to get a cow's head. Takafumi looks it up on his phone and finds out that it would cost 5 million yen. Yosuke explains that the ice spirit he summoned for cooling the room is demanding the cow's head as compensation. If they don't offer it, the spirit threatens to freeze their fields for 10 years. However, the spirit changes its mind and agrees to accept a fish head as a compromise. They set up an altar for the offering. Yosuke starts craving the fish head and blames it on their dinosaur transformations, recalling how they terrorized Fujimiya. He warns that staying transformed for too long can be dangerous, citing his own experience as the Blaze Dragon. He became trapped in the dragon's thought pattern for a month and couldn't transform back until the elf found him. The memory continues as a noble accompanied by an army of soldiers arrives wanting to deal with the dragon. The elf recognizes him as the head of the Reincarnated family, to whom she owes money. It is also revealed that the elf is a princess, surprising Takafumi and Fujimiya. Reincarnated demands Yosuke and provokes the elf, but she is stopped due to a magical pact they made. Reincarnated berates the elf for using herself as collateral. Yosuke wakes up and destroys the magical restraint, believing he has repaid the debt to the elf. He tries to leave but is stopped by the elf. With the pact gone, a giant warrior steps up on behalf of Reincarnated, ready to teach the elf a lesson. Before the fight between Yosuke, the elf princess, and Reincarnated's warrior can begin, Yosuke gives Reincarnated a ring to help pay off the elf's debt. However, seeing Yosuke give away another ring angers the elf, causing her to unleash her power. The ground starts to crumble and Yosuke grabs onto the elf as they both fall into a swamp while Reincarnated's men retreat. It is revealed that the reason the elf fell into debt was to buy back the ring that Yosuke had given her. Later that day, Fujimiya's friend Sawa arrives at the apartment complex and is approached by Chiaki, who creeps her out. Takafumi's nonchalant attitude makes Sawa even more nervous. As they walk up the stairs, Chiaki talks about his collection and posting videos online, causing Sawa to panic. When they enter the apartment, Sawa warns Fujimiya that Chiaki and Takafumi are scumbags who objectify women. Seeing the fish head altar in the living room, she freaks out and tries to leave, thinking it's some kind of occult practice. However, before she can leave, Yosuke returns and his creepy smile makes things worse. Despite this, Fujimiya explains that it's not a cult and that Yosuke is just a YouTuber. Sawa finds it strange that Fujimiya is hanging out with them but quickly realizes that Fujimiya has feelings for Takafumi. To test if Takafumi has feelings for her as well, Sawa shows him pictures of them together. But Takafumi becomes fixated on the random men in the background, confusing Sawa. Sawa then becomes interested in knowing what Fujimiya was like in elementary school, and Takafumi tells her that she looked very similar to her brother, Chiaki. Sawa wonders how Chiaki is doing, not recognizing that the shady guy was Chiaki all along. Yosuke decides to show Sawa what Fujimiya was like back in elementary school, but Takafumi immediately stops him, realizing that Yosuke revealed his magic. Yosuke tries to erase their memories but gets restrained by Takafumi, while Fujimiya helps Sawa and the other two escape. After this, Fujimiya scolds Yosuke for his reliance on erasing memories, prompting him to recall a similar incident involving the elf at the hot spring. When they arrive at the hot spring, Yosuke is surprised to see the sign in Japanese. The elf mentions that the hot spring's founder also came from another world but has passed away. The owner of the hot spring appears and explains that it was created using divine power. However, Yosuke's attention is more focused on organizing his inventory, treating the situation like game dialogue he cannot skip. This disappoints Takafumi and Fujimiya, and they end up sharing a room at the end, much to Yosuke's annoyance when he realizes he has to share with the elf. The elf is excited upon seeing their shared room, but Yosuke takes his student to another room, leaving the elf shocked and disappointed to be resting alone. However, Yosuke suddenly returns and starts giving her a foot massage without her consent, expressing gratitude for her help in his dragon transformation. Although the elf cannot handle the massage, Yosuke insists and continues. Their interaction is interrupted when Alicia, Edgar, and Rika are revealed to have been eavesdropping. Alicia apologizes to the elf but mistakenly assumes that they are a couple, leading the elf to proudly display her ring. Yosuke questions them about their presence, and they explain that they were training in the mountains. Rika informs Yosuke that they were training a new skill and expresses eagerness for him to witness it. Yosuke accesses Alicia's memory to observe their new skills, which also reveals a fancy sheath being used as a laundry rack. The elf becomes interested in the sheath's origin and immediately sets off to search for it. Yosuke explains to the group that the sheath they found is actually an ancient magic tool, and the elves have a goal to collect them. Suddenly, they sense something burning, and they realize that the hot spring the end is under attack by a hypno beast. The beast has taken control of the owner's daughter and made her open the door. Yosuke attempts to use his magic, but his spells are blocked by two birds in the sky. Without his magic, he resorts to using magic charms to fight. He uses a wind charm to fly, attacks with a fire charm, and slows his descent with an ice charm. There is still one bird remaining, but the elf intervenes and defeats it using her new weapon from the mountains. However, due to a misunderstanding, Yosuke fails to notice her actions. Fujimiya wonders how the birds were able to suppress Yosuke's magic, and they discover that it was due to the bird's terrible breath, which suppressed the spirits necessary for Yosuke's magic to work. Yosuke decides to regroup with Alicia and the others, only to find them being chased by their hypnotized friends. He joins Alicia and ponders if her wand has a hidden function similar to the elf's sword. He takes hold of the wand, and it emits a bright light as it flies into the sky. The wand creates two barriers, and Alicia, initially flustered with Yosuke on top of her, calms down and uses her magic to connect their minds, freeing them from the beast's control. The Hypno Beast retaliates, but Alicia evades its attack and counterattacks using one of Rika's techniques. Yosuke reveals that the wand boosted Alicia's strength and allowed her to gain the techniques of those she synchronized her mind with to free them. The beast tries to escape and summons a group of monster hounds, but Yosuke's magic returns, and he uses his water magic to restrain and defeat the hounds, causing water to pour down and extinguish the remaining fire. Afterward, Yosuke puts up a barrier around the exposed bathing area, which pleases the owner as they now have a beautiful mountain view. Everything turns out well, but Fujimiya wonders how this story is related to Yosuke being scolded for erasing memories. Yosuke explains that after the battle, he had another bath in the hot spring and Alicia joined him. As Alicia approaches, her skirt gets caught, causing an accidental exposure. In response, Yosuke immediately erases his own memory of what he saw, acting cool as if he forgot. Alicia assumes he has no interest in someone like her, thinking of herself as a little girl. However, she is shocked to discover that she is actually slightly older than Yosuke. Alicia feels devastated, questioning if her birthday might be incorrect since she has no memories before the age of 9. Using Yosuke's memory magic, they witness that Alicia was found after a goblin attack, with no memories. She was saved by the guards and subsequently adopted into the village where Riga and Edgar lived. Alicia cherishes every memory they have made together. Hearing this, Yosuke feels guilty and admits that he erased her memories twice before. He reveals that he was the one who stopped the goblin invasion and the one who fixed the barrier in the sealed city, although he also confesses that he was the one who destroyed it in the first place. Yosuke explains that he is from another world and hoped that attacking the strongest barrier with his most powerful attack would create a distortion in space-time to allow him to return. Alicia forgives Yosuke but asks him not to erase any more memories, expressing that she doesn't want him to change who he is. Yosuke concedes and promises not to erase any memories about Alicia. However, they are suddenly attacked by sniper shots and Yosuke is shocked to see his barrier broken. More shots are fired, prompting Yosuke to flee while leaving Alicia behind. 1 month later, Yosuke embarks on a quest to slay a singing monster. The monster sings a song about the 3 shrines and trials of the land. Yosuke uses his magic and charges at the beast, but he crashes when he realizes that the monster is actually Mabel. He becomes curious about why she's in the woods and expresses concern that she might be in danger from other monsters. Mabel reveals her cloak, which allows her to disguise herself as a monster. Yosuke starts petting her, causing her to feel embarrassed. Not knowing that Mabel was fired, Yosuke wonders why she isn't working as a knight in the capital. Mabel pretends that she quit her job to live a more liberated life and explains that she now resides in the forest. She has erected a scary ice sculpture to scare off anyone who approaches, intending to live there indefinitely. Realizing that Mabel is the singing monster he was supposed to slay, Yosuke prepares to fight her. However, Mabel is terrified and immediately agrees to leave. She takes down the ice statue and contemplates her future. Yosuke suggests that she could sell the ring he gave her for financial security, but Mabel insists on keeping it. Yosuke then proposes that she could make money as a bard, but Mabel feels embarrassed and admits that she is used to singing alone. Yosuke contemplates how Mabel, with her cuteness and singing talent, could have easily become rich as an idol in Japan. However, he quickly shifts his thoughts to finding a way back to his own world, hoping to cheer himself up. Mabel offers to sing a song from his homeland, and Yosuke wonders which song she will choose. To his surprise, she ends up singing the background music from the Sonic the Hedgehog game. Yosuke eventually passes out on Mabel's lap while she continues singing for him. During their time together, they encounter some bandits who plan to ambush them. However, the elf appears and takes out the bandits, glaring at Yosuke as he rests on Mabel's lap. Yosuke thinks she is nice for saving them, but Takafumi and Fujimiya can see that the elf is clearly furious. Takafumi asks his uncle about his love for video game music, and his uncle decides to play some. However, when he reads the manual, he realizes that he has been mispronouncing the hero's name for the past decade, causing him to have a meltdown. Yosuke attempts to record a YouTube video as the elf but struggles to maintain the appearance and remains downcast about his mistake. Fujimiya tries to reassure him, saying that mispronouncing a name is not a big deal. However, Yosuke argues that names are important, recalling the time when the elf revealed her real name to him. Both Fujimiya and Yosuke are shocked to hear this and insist on seeing the memory. The next morning, the elf confronts Yosuke about his interactions with Mabel and Alicia. She expresses her dislike for him, calling them by their names when she has known him longer. Yosuke defends himself, stating that she never revealed her name to him either. They argue, and in a sudden turn, Yosuke reveals his actual name as Yosuke, leaving the elf flustered. He asks her for her name, but it turns out to be super long and impossible to remember. Yosuke decides to give the elf a nickname, calling her Sui. The elf initially finds it disrespectful and believes her people would never allow it. However, Yosuke explains that he thinks the nickname suits her personally because Sui means green, just like the color of her eyes, which he finds beautiful like jewels. The elf becomes flustered and requests that he only calls her Sui in private. She promises to keep his name a secret as well, wanting to be only one to use it. Mabel joins them, curious about what they were doing. Yosuke mentions that he is there to explore the ruins, and Mabel recognizes it as one of the 3 shrines of the land mentioned in her song. They suddenly realize that it applies to Yosuke as a foreign warrior. Yosuke approaches the shrine unexpectedly. He destroys it. A godly being emerges and Yosuke prepares to go all out in battle. However, Takafumi interrupts and questions why Yosuke destroyed the shrine. Yosuke explains that he was brought to the world by a great power and thought that defeating the shrine's power would bring him closer to returning home. Fujimiya points out that there should have been 3 shrines, but Yosuke reveals that he had already destroyed the other 2 in his previous adventures. The memory continues as Yosuke unleashes his full power to blast the monster, but it quickly regenerates. The elf notes that the monster is a mass of holy magic with no physical body, rendering regular attacks ineffective. As monsters continue to rise from the ground, the elf and Mabel engage in combat using their respective weapons and abilities. However, the monsters keep reviving no matter how much they attack. Yosuke decides to burn them to ash, but just as he approaches, he suddenly falls under mind control and unleashes his flames against the 2 girls. In a desperate attempt to save Mabel, the elf jumps in front of her, but they are unexpectedly protected by the god-freezing sword. They contemplate how they should fight back when suddenly, Rega appears and sends Yosuke flying. Rika realizes that Rega took down an orc and Alicia begins to heal the elf and Mabel. The elf recognizes Rega and realizes that Yosuke was the one who punched him. She informs the group that they are up against a godly being and that Yosuke is currently being mind-controlled. Alicia uses the power of her wand to break the mind control and bring Yosuke back to his senses. Alicia finds herself in Yosuke's memory but gets rejected as his memories of childhood are described as dark and lonely, with only a box in front of him. Despite feeling sorry for him, they understand that those were his happiest memories. Yosuke regains control and uses his magic to slap himself, waking himself up. He unleashes the flame of the blaze dragon, destroying the container that held the dragon. However, instead of being defeated, the dragon begins to revive and absorbs the holy monster's power. Since Yosuke couldn't fight something without a physical body, his plan was for the dragon to absorb the monster and then defeat the dragon. Alicia questions how he will defeat it now that the dragon has gained the regeneration and mind control powers of the holy monster. Yosuke realizes that he may have made a mistake and didn't think that far ahead. With Mabel too terrified to use the god-freezing sword, Yosuke suggests using it himself. However, Mabel's fear prevents her from cooperating. The group begins to lose hope, but the elf devises a plan. She explains that they need to deal more damage to the dragon than it can heal and mentions that her sword can absorb and amplify energy. If Yosuke provides his energy, they should have enough power to defeat the dragon. Alicia expresses concern about the dragon's mind control and abilities, but the elf reveals that the jewel on her forehead protects her from such attacks. Alicia approaches Yosuke, and they briefly discuss the erased memory from their encounter at the hot spring. However, Alicia is too embarrassed to reveal its contents. As the dragon begins to stir, the elf awkwardly asks Yosuke to carry her so she can fly. Reluctantly, Yosuke uses his chain to lift her into the air. Mabel assumes she won't be needed for the fight, but the dragon unexpectedly targets her due to the Blaze Dragon's inherent grudge against the Ice Clan. Yosuke suggests using Mabel as bait to distract the dragon, and she reluctantly agrees. As Mabel charges at the dragon, it hurls a boulder at her, but Alicia comes to her rescue, employing one of Edgar's sword skills. While the others distract the dragon, Yosuke notices the elf's worry. However, he reminds her of his past words about never giving up, and they brace themselves to face the dragon. Takafumi pauses the memory at this point, tears welling up in his eyes as he finally gets to witness a true fantasy battle, something he has longed to see since meeting his uncle. Yosuke brews coffee and Takafumi prepares some snacks, both eager to continue watching the battle unfold. The memory resumes as they approach the dragon and it unleashes its fiery breath. However, Yosuke shields the group from the attack, transferring his magic to the elf as she charges fearlessly at the dragon. With Mabel's support using her ice abilities to bind the dragon and Yosuke channeling his lightning to charge up the elf's sword, they successfully create an enormous blade of energy that slashes down onto the dragon, defeating it. The tremendous effort causes the elf to faint and she starts to fall. Yosuke quickly rushes to her side, catching her before she hits the ground. In that moment, the elf tries to confess her feelings to Yosuke, but he cannot hear her due to the noise and commotion. Carrying the unconscious elf, Yosuke begins their descent. However, he notices a bird smell emanating from her and curiously starts sniffing her, causing her to struggle. In the midst of their struggle, they end up crashing down. Fortunately, no one is seriously injured. Yosuke collects the flame of the Holy Blaze Dragon, and the elf warns him about the importance of keeping it. The rest of the group rushes over to check on them, and Mabel, seeking praise for her contributions, asks for recognition. Yosuke expresses his gratitude to all of them, acknowledging that he would have struggled without their help. He particularly praises Mabel, who seems to enjoy being carried just like how Yosuke carried the elf earlier. Yosuke assumes they all desire the sensation of flying, so he decides to grab Alicia and jumps up into the sky, much to her surprise and flailing. When they land, Riga and Edgar express their desire to take a turn. The elf appears furious with Mabel. Despite her anger, Yosuke thanks Mabel for singing to him and presents her with another ring as a token of his appreciation. As Alicia questions why Mabel refers to him as Wolfkin Blood when she thought his name was Kuroki, Yosuke explains that he simply made up those names and reveals that his real name is Yosuke. The elf becomes upset with Yosuke for revealing his real name so easily, while the others find his fake names to be cooler, which amuses Yosuke. In the midst of their conversation, the elf's anger causes Yosuke to accidentally drop the flame of the dragon. Curious about Yosuke's intentions with the flame, the elf questions him. Yosuke reveals that when they defeated the dragon, it caused a warp in the space-time continuum. He plans to combine the flame with other entities in the hopes of creating a portal large enough for him to return home. However, the elf suddenly tries to destroy the flame, powering up her sword for a struggle. Fujimi observes that her true intention may be to prevent Yosuke from leaving, suspecting that he may have made the flame stronger to create the portal home. Takefumi intervenes, not wanting to spoil the story or disrupt their journey. As they start to feel hungry, Yosuke decides to treat everyone to ramen once again. They enjoy a delicious meal together, and as they walk home, Takefumi reflects on how much his life has changed in just a year, contemplating the adventures and newfound friendships he has experienced.